Hello and welcome to Seeing Jesus with Paul Miller. I'm Liz Voberil and I'm here with Paul and our colleague John, who's our director for the Asia Pacific region. And we are going to continue our series today on the wonder of Jesus. Lots of you who are familiar know that we often say on this podcast that there are lots of wonderful ministries and organizations that help the church to be the hands and feet of Jesus. But seeJesus likes to work on the imagination and the heart. And so here we're working on our hearts and imaginations to see Jesus in some of these very familiar passages, places where I find myself knowing what has happened, but I may not have looked at how it happened or noticed how Jesus related through those moments in his life. So that's the kind of thing we're paying attention to here. Today, we're going back in time. Our organization here in this series is not necessarily chronological, so we're going back from the Garden of Gethsemane to Jesus before Pilate. So I'll set the stage a little bit. Jesus is out of Gethsemane, and he's already been before the Jewish leaders and bounced over to the Roman leaders. And in the midst of confusion in Luke 23, someone shouts out, "We found this man misleading our nation and forbidding us to give tribute to Caesar and saying that he himself is Christ, a king." So then picking up in John 18, verse 33, I'll read. So Pilate entered his headquarters again and called Jesus and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me?" Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not from the world." Then Pilate said to him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." Pilate said to him, "What is truth?"
Pilate asked Jesus a seeming innocuous question, which is, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And we're going to sit on that for about 5 minutes, because you've got to understand Pilate's tone to understand the conversation that Jesus has with Pilate. And you think, well, how the heck can you figure out the tone 2,000 years later? But if you actually think about Pilate's question, "Are you king of the Jews?" it actually makes sense that we can get his tone. And I think the evidence is pretty strong that although it's a serious question, that Pilate is mocking Jesus. And I have a whole bunch of reasons for saying that. Notice that Pilate doesn't say, "Do you claim to be king of the Jews?" But "Are you in fact the ruler now of the king of the Jews and the rightful, hereditary, or by force ruler?" But he doesn't put in that word "claim." And it makes that difference is huge, because it was that little word was such a big deal that Pilate, here, let me give you the whole path. This starts a joke. I believe it's a joke of Pilate mocking Jesus, because the soldiers pick up on this and mock Jesus as the king of the Jews by reenacting his kingship. Giving him a purple robe and crown of thorns and a staff. And then they take the staff out of his hand and beat his crown of thorns over his head. I mean, it's a brutal mocking. And then when they get to the cross, Pilate puts the sign up over Jesus, King of the Jews, in Greek, Latin, and Aramaic. Or Hebrew, and the leaders of the Jews, the high priests, are upset at that sign, and they're upset because they know Pilate is mocking them. And they just want, because this is what we do to your king of the Jews. So it's a mocking of the Jewish leadership. So they want Pilate to amend the sign to add the word claim. So if that word claim is really critical, it was enough for them to risk Pilate's wrath to send a whole other, group of people to him.
To follow up, to copy edit the sign.
Yeah, right. To copy edit the sign.
Mm-hmm.
And because it changes the meaning, it mocks Jesus that he claimed to be king of the Jews. And this is what we've happened to him. I mean, let me try not to go on and on, but if you actually read the Gospel of Mark uses this on the Passion account in Mark 15. The mock that Jesus claims to be king is the unifying thread through the entire narrative. I won't go into all the details, but I'll mention the first one there. When in Mark 15, this is verse 9, Pilate taunts the Jewish leadership twice, asking what they want him to do with the king of the Jews. He doesn't say Jesus of Nazareth, but he says king of the Jews. And then Mark pauses and explains why he's mocking them. For he perceived that it was envy that the chief priests had delivered them up. I mean, at a very low level, I tend to do this with people. If I notice they have a kind of a strong opinion or something, I just delight in sort of tweaking them a little bit about it. In fact, my wife has scolded me to stop it, so I sort of stopped it. It's just really fun when people have strong opinion. Like he's tweaking them. He's kind of, I'm sure all the soldiers. I mean, because we know the whole praetorium was. The whole. Not praetorium, the whole cohort was out, which was about 480 men. I'm sure it probably wasn't a full 500 guys there, but Pilate has an audience here. Mm-hmm, in other words, that he's speaking to.
Right. Isn't it also like, I guess I'm struck by, usually we don't have to ask a question like, are you the king of the Jews? Because it's one of those things that if someone has that much power and authority, it's usually fairly self-evident. Like kings, at least in British movies of a certain era, they walk around with crowns on their heads made of gold, not thorns, right? Or they have a certain demeanor that they're an important person before they even say so.
Well, on top of that, the Romans are not dummies, let alone Pilate.
Right.
So they're fully aware, and he's fully aware, right?
Yeah, right. Pilate's fully aware. I mean, Jesus has been beaten already in the Jewish trial. He's in chains. He hasn't slept since the previous day, and he's exhausted. He's beat up, bloodied, and from the first beating that he got when he was, and certainly bruised, because the mocking actually started. It was Jewish mocking. They were mocking him for claiming to be a prophet, because they blindfolded him and hit him, saying, "Who hit you?" It's really been. It just shows the human heart when it's unmasked is just brutal. One other little thought on that is that I have a friend who is a director of another mission, and when he had a usually young man who seemed maybe overly ambitious, he would ask them, "Do you want my job?" And they would always say, no. He was just outing their ambition. He didn't say to them, "Are you the director?" That would be mocking. I mean, even the first one was a little on the edge of it, but he wanted to be them to be self-aware. But it's just like "Are you the king of Jesus?" is loaded with meaning by the fact that Jesus does not claim, but by not having that word in it. So anyway, and the other thing is it's a universal guy thing. I mean, it's just what guys do is guys get proud and get arrogant. I mean, not every human does, but it's sort of a guy thing. So if you're in a high school locker room, football locker room, and a freshman comes in and says, he's going to be quarterback someday, and someone overhears it, that'll be his name for a year or two. They'll call him, "Hey, quarterback." It's what guys do. It's just universal guy humor, and that's of course what the soldiers enact out. So anyway, I'm giving a big mouthful here. Then Jesus' response to Pilate is very striking. Liz?
Yes. Jesus' response, this is John 18, verse 34. "Do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me?"
Good. And the of your own accord is a interpretive reading of the Greek. The Greek says pretty clearly, "Do you say this from yourself?" So of your own accord maybe would signal a little bit like your own volition, and from yourself suggest from yourself, like it would indicate that Pilate might have some kind of genuine personal interest in Jesus. Jesus is basically saying, all right, where does this question come from?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Do you say this from yourself, from your own interest, or did others say it to you about me? So is it, and option B, did others say it about me, is just Pilate is kind of being a functionary. He's just sort of parroting what others say. What strike you guys about what Jesus is doing here?
Well, he doesn't, not that Pilate was expecting an answer, but he doesn't answer Pilate's question. Mm-hmm. I mean, he comes back with a question.
Right.
And the question is it doesn't leave Pilate two great options. It either becomes self-revealing of something maybe Pilate doesn't want to reveal in terms of his own personal interest.
Right.
Or it just looks like he's just kind of going with the flow of the crowd or what everyone else is saying.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so there's this kind of, I don't know, it's just kind of an interesting way to respond to a mocking question.
It's more curiosity than you would expect from somebody who's already been beaten several times, right, and is on trial. Like, usually in that kind of pressure, you just try to say the minimum necessary to get out with the maximum of yourself intact.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. And I like your word curiosity, Liz, because Jesus is probing Pilate. Mm-hmm, He's probing his motives. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of a double dynamic here, because he's leaving space for Pilate, but he's also intruding into his space. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what Pilate's response, Liz, do you want to read that?
"Am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you over to me. What have you done?"
All right, great. Yeah, I like the way you read that, Liz. Now, there are a couple things that are striking about that question. One is that Pilate answers Jesus' question. And that he doesn't say, "What do you mean?" or "This doesn't make any sense," or like the Samaritan woman in John 4 would have said something, might have said something, along those lines. So think of these, and it takes a minute to understand what Pilate is saying. Pilate is actually answering one of the questions. So option A is Pilate is motivated from himself. Option B is others said it to me. So think of those two options. Am I a Jew? your own nation and your chief priests have delivered you over to me. So the implication is that he's offended by Jesus saying, is this from yourself? In other words, i.e., only Jews would be interested in Jewish things. I mean, this is an incredibly tribal world, and it's incredibly hierarchical. And you can see that coming out. Like, I, as an elite Roman, have absolutely no interest in you. There's nothing in me that is interested in it and this guy. So it's obviously others say it about me. Does that make sense?
Yep. Although it's it's a stronger others say it than like, yes, I'm a functionary and people told me that this is now my responsibility. So I'm, it's more like, well, no, I'm not no personal interest.
Like, why so defensive?
Yeah, it's exactly that. And Pilate is defensive enough that he skips the first couple of logical pieces that anybody in the first or the second or third century would have picked up, because the first logical, like, so just like you're thinking, why is he saying, "Am I a Jew?" Like, what? Like, where's that coming from? But the sort of the logical pieces are like, the first logical people would be, a calm Pilate would say, "No, I am not personally interested in this because I am a Roman, an elite Roman, and we are way above you, and we are your conquerors and your lords. So there's no interest that we have." Like, that would be the paragraph, kind of badly written. But Pilate kind of spits the words out. Like, am I a Jew? Like, why would you even think that I have a interest in you? Like, what? Like, it's just, and then he has a double mock. Then he mocks. Why would you, the first one was, why would you even think of dreaming that I have an interest in you? And we do know that Jews were generally mocked, throughout the Roman world. They were protected. I mean, they weren't like persecuted any more than anybody else, but it was not uncommon to have a play where the Jew in it is mocked, as a kind of a butt of jokes. And then this next one, your own nation and your chief priests have delivered you over to you. This is kind of subtle, but in other words, am I not a Jew, but even you, and am I not part of your tribe, but your own tribe thinks you are worthy of death. They've handed you over to me. So he underlies it. It's just not the chief priest. He actually adds your own nation. Like, your whole people despise you. The rulers of your people despise you. So Jesus is he's not only a despised Jew, but even his fellow Jews who Pilate despises, they despise Jesus. Does that make sense? Like,
yes, and just going back to Pilate's first question, right? If his own people despise him, he's clearly not their king.
Right. That's right. Right. He's clearly, yeah. Thank you, Liz, for making that, tying that. He's clearly shows that first thing was mocking, because he knows obviously that Jesus isn't, he knows all of that. John, any thoughts?
No, probably it brings me back to my days in junior high when, you're just starting to get interested in girls, and someone comes up and says, "Hey, do you like her?" And my typical response from me would have been like, "No, of course not. Do you like girls? You like girls, don't you?" I mean, I don't like girls, let alone her. It's just kind of like this. It's this kind of like, you get kind of flustered and you're just kind of pushing.
You're probably blushing while you say that.
It's just like, and so it's just kind of this. Yeah, it's easy to miss when you're reading through this dialogue. And then he changes the subject, says, "Well, what have you done?" And so it's Not sure that really has to do anything with it, but it reminded me of that.
There is a locker room element to the Pilate Jesus conversation for sure, in terms of the vibe.
Yeah, very much so. So then Pilate, and John, I have too many memories of that, so I kind of want to move on. Then Pilate has this very Roman question that, what have you done? There's no mocking in that. It's just like, it's very Roman, that they were the engineering and pragmatic people. Like, they just kind of like get to the bottom line. And I mean, so the great thing is Jesus' question, which is so generous, has rattled Pilate. And so he shifts the subject away from this whole thing on kingship. And then Jesus answers, so Liz, go ahead and read Jesus' next comment.
My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting, that I might not be delivered over to the Jews, but my kingdom is not of this world.
Now, of course, what's unusual about Jesus' statement? What has he assumed? Remember Pilate, A was, do you say this from yourself? Do you have a genuine personal interest in me? And B was that he's just, others said it to you about me. He's just doing his job, and doesn't like being woken at this ungodly hour, So A is from yourself. B is that. Now, Pilate has emphatically said the answer is B, that it's not A.
No personal interest.
And then, of course, what does Jesus answer? How does Jesus answer? How does he almost assume Pilate has said?
Well, he assumes the letter A.
He assumes A.
And in many ways, he's answering the original question.
He's answering, yes.
Right, because this is the response to, what have you done?
Yes.
Right, which is not... I don't really hear any, what have I done there?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, he's like answering much more about like...
It would flow better if in verse 33 he said, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And we skipped to verse 36.
Yes.
And then Jesus says, "My kingdom is not of this world."
Yes.
Oh, nice edit, John. Nice.
And you guys got all the nuances there, and they're just delightful. So just think what he does. He ignores what have you done and presumes that that Pilate's original mocking question was serious, and that Pilate really did have a personal understanding of him. So it absolutely deft is the word. I'm not sure. It's incredibly perceptive too, because Pilate's answer uncovered that Pilate did have a genuine personal interest in Jesus. Otherwise, his emphatic no and his despisal of Jesus doesn't make any sense.
He's too touchy.
What's that?
He's too touchy about all that stuff.
He's just way too touchy.
Before he even answers Pilate's original question, he in verses 34 and 35, he pokes at Pilate's heart and motive. Right. And then he answers it.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
So now that he's uncovered that Pilate has a genuine interest in him, he says that, as you said, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting that I might be delivered over the Jews. But my kingdom is not of this world. It's actually a little bit of a poetry there. It's an ABBA pattern. Jesus often speaks in a kind of a poetic fashion. And it's striking that it's actually a kind word to Pilate. Any thoughts on that? Just the kindness behind that?
If from king to king, it feels like Jesus is not coming in a confronting way to Pilate and the kingdom Pilate represents here.
Yeah, it's just, I'm not a threat to you, Pilate.
Yeah.
So he's diffusing the situation. It's just actually it's a kind of an act of kindness to Pilate. I just find it moving. It's just he's so calm and quiet. Like what you're seeing with Jesus is the fleshing out of his communion with his Father.
It's like Jesus is showing hospitality to Pilate here, but actually Jesus is the one who's been dragged before. Like it's Pilate's the host. He's the one but Jesus is the one thinking in those ways.
Well, Pilate's the one in charge. And then I think we've said, Dallas Willard described Jesus as relaxed. And it's like, if anybody should be relaxed, it should be the person in power.
Mm-hmm,
right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Jesus who seems completely, the way my kids would say it is Jesus is chill in the moment.
He's very chill. Yeah. And yet at the same time, you can see his power. You can feel his power in his stability and his quiet, but actually the teeth to his power. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is a battle commander, a general speaking. That you don't, we're so used to thinking of Jesus as meek and mild and not as a warrior. So this is a warrior. Of course, he's in a battle with Pilate, but it shows his incredibly mastery of his spirit and his mind. He's so in communion with his Father that he has this power, and he's willing to say it even in a place where he's been mocked and will be mocked more. And then, Liz, go ahead.
Pilate responds, "You are a king then."
And by the way, I do like the NIV here with an exclamation mark. It really makes sense of the text, like it's a mock.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're a king, That I do like to compare that with the Samaritan woman, who would have said, a realistic person connected to reality would have said any number of things. Like, what are you talking about? What world are you from? You know what I mean? And Pilate is, oh, you're a king, which shows you what about Pilate? That kind of reinforces what you'd said before, Liz, that Jesus, that was a mocking. The very first comment was a mocking thing. So he's mocking again.
Right.
And why don't we go ahead, Liz, and read the next.
So Jesus responds, "You say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice."
Yeah, it's really immense, isn't it? How does that strike you guys?
Well, is there a layered meaning to what Jesus is saying when he says, "You say that I am king"?
Oh, of course. Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I think when I was saying earlier that he's chill, there's a sense that chill means he's not passive. He's in the moment. He's relaxed in terms of how and when and what to respond, and in doing so, he's not afraid to engage in ways that are not only pricking at Pilate's heart at the beginning, but here he's kind of digging a little deeper, and he's not afraid to do that. So both revealing Pilate's heart in a greater way, but also revealing himself in a greater way.
Yeah. Liz?
I'm thinking about what we were saying in our last episode about Mary and discovery. And it's interesting that the way Jesus is doing this too here, it's like, well, you say that I am right. So there's a little bit of there's mock in Pilate. There's also Pilate is also discovering, he's really discovering the mettle in Jesus through all of this, because Jesus is, I'm sure, like no one he's questioned before. So Pilate is discovering that otherworldliness of Jesus here.
Yeah. And one of the things I love about you say that I'm king is he takes Pilate's mock and drains it of mocking and makes it into an absolute statement. He does that with Simon in Luke 7, when Simon has been judging Jesus and the woman has been weeping at his table, and Jesus tells Simon this parable, and Simon interprets the parable correctly. So Jesus says to Simon, "You have judged correctly." And he's playing with him because Simon has done nothing but judge. Like, he got the parable right, but he's just been this judging machine. I tell you that every time I read what Jesus says here, it kind of bowls me over. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. It's just like all of Scripture. It doesn't leave you. There's no neutral on that. There's no. It's a description. Like, you either have to run from that statement or you have to worship. I mean, it's and especially said so calmly that that he is truth himself, and anybody who has any integrity is going to listen to him. I don't know. It really is. It's just kind of mind-boggling, and it's kind of mind-blowing. And remember what think of the thread of the conversation, that Pilate said this was a tribal issue, a Jewish tribal issue, and Jesus says, no, everyone is of the truth. Romans, Greeks, Armenians, Chinese, Ethiopians, Persians, everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice.
I'm also struck that the context of this conversation is one where listens to my voice is so very grounded and granular. Like, that is the nature of conversation, right? Like, is Pilate going to listen to Jesus's voice? That's I often think of that as metaphorical, right? The sheep and the shepherd and the voice, right? But Pilate is standing before the man talking, listens to my voice. So it also feels like it lays down a choice for Pilate here.
Yes. It is very much an invitation to Pilate. Yeah. John?
I'm just thinking about how the conversation itself could be, or it could have spiraled into something really murky and muddy.
Yeah.
And the way that Jesus engages Pilate is not only personal, it's not only intentional, but it's really clarifying. Like, there's clarity brought into the murkiness of but like, Pilate is just kind of, if he had his way and if he was in charge of the conversation, it would just kind of be this murky, kind of innuendo-filled conversation. And Jesus is just cutting to the heart. He's cutting things very clear, and in doing so, it's very instructive, because I think about being in a lot of those kinds of conversations personally, that things get really muddy really quick, and to know how to engage with a person in a difficult conversation in a way that brings clarity to our hearts, let alone clarity to what's really at stake here, is really, really difficult.
Yeah. And then, of course, Pilate closes.
Yeah, Pilate's famous. Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" After he had said this, he went back outside to the Jews and told them, "I find no guilt in him."
Which tells you a couple things. I mean, start with that last one. What does that, I mean, just off the top of our head, off the top of your head, I find no guilt in him. What strikes you about that? Because this was an interrogation.
Yeah. I mean, I find no guilt in him. He doesn't see any reason why Jesus should be killed here at this point. He would like to not be responsible for that decision.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was his disposition at the beginning too or not. But in any case, he's emerged from this conversation with no greater desire to get rid of Jesus than he had before.
Yeah.
If I was Pilate, I would just think it'd be easier to find guilt and come back and say, he's guilty as charged. In two ways. It would just be my way of poking at somebody who's irritating me right now in Jesus. But on top of that, to give into the crowd just seems like, well, let's just go with the flow. They're upset, and
it's the middle of the night after all.
Yeah, and so to actually go back out and say that is extremely intentional on his part and quite revealing. It
is quite revealing. It also reveals. I'm trying to think if you were to expand. What does that statement say? I'm expanding it. He was an elite Roman. He's not. I mean, Israel is a backwater province. It's a sub-province of Syria, and he actually doesn't have a full legion here, largely because there's no danger. There's not a lot of danger from the east there because it's desert. The Parthians, the Persians, were much more dangerous. So there's a full legion up at in Syria, at Damascus, and on the port there. But it's just a long way of saying I know men, and I know how to read people. I didn't, and just from and it's quite likely the conversation was longer than this, and that this is a condensing of it. But the condensing nails the conversation perfectly. That he's able to read Jesus in this, and he has interrogated many, many people. He knows a crook, he knows arrogance when he sees it, and it's kind of like. People who are really, really good at job interviews, at reading people, it's a pretty strong statement. It actually shows it would have taken quite a bit of courage on Pilate's part. It was the Romans worked through their local elites at this stage in the Roman Empire, and they took those Roman elites very seriously. And 36 or 37, Pilate, so the 3 or 4 years after this, Pilate was removed from power because the Samaritan Sanhedrin was upset with him over something that he had done. I mean, the Romans could be cruel, but they were pretty respectful of the elites. It was so much easier for them to run through their, to rule through their, and so I'm just saying Pilate wasn't stupid. This is pretty weighty, and even anyway. And the other thing is, what is truth? I just love it that the fact that this conversation, whether it's 2 minutes or 20 minutes, that Jesus ends it on what is truth. Mm-hmm. It's just remarkable that it began with a mocking question, and he's gotten it's an incredible probe in the conversation towards Pilate's heart, and Jesus has gotten right down to his core cynicism,
right,
of life.
And the questioner, right? Pilate's in the role of the questioner, winds up walking away with a question that whether Pilate's kind of like asking that out to the sky, or he's clearly not asking Jesus, oh wait, like, do tell, what is the truth? Like, that he's not asking Jesus that question. It's himself, his own, which is like, usually that's not, it's worked backwards, I guess, from how a normal questioning is supposed to work in that way.
Yeah. That I had not thought of that nuance, that he is saying it to Jesus, but it's also a question kind of to the sky, to himself too.
Yeah.
So he's,
So if you had to guess, would you think that it's not said in a mocking tone as much as almost like a sigh?
Yeah, we obviously we don't know the tone.
It's such an easy question to read with the cynicism of our own age, right? Like it's easy for me to hear that as what is truth? Like kind of
he's not mocking Jesus though with it. I guess that's the difference. He's mocking the idea of truth, but it's it's a little bit because Jesus said, everyone on the side of truth listens to my voice. And I think some of that's behind that is in the upper reaches of the Roman world. There's an awful lot of manipulation. I mean, that was everywhere. I'm just, it was a world where you never knew what was, whether friendship was real or not. The world had been, and thus the Roman elites had become increasingly cynical. If you read some of Petronius's stuff, which would have been written 30 years later, you really get a feel for that kind of mocking sitcom view of the world almost. But it's a remarkable it's just a remarkable conversation. And it just, and what other things kind of jump out to you guys as you think of this whole conversation?
Well, I mean, we did mention just how you started with a mock and you ended with, and again, we're not quite sure exactly how Pilate, I'm almost wondering if he's asking it to himself. Like this playbook of how the conversation started and where it ended is not typical. Usually, you start a conversation with mocking, and it can easily spiral into a serious quarrel, or it can just be very immature and just kind of be throwing around a lot of insults and not really getting anywhere.
Yeah.
But the conversation, because of the way that Jesus is engaging it, really it's very meaningful. It's very purposeful.
Yeah.
It gets to the heart of very important issues of Pilate's heart, let alone, ending on what is truly truth.
Okay, so we're going to push pause here now with Pilate just having asked the what is truth question, walking out to the Jewish leaders, and we're going to pick up this story again in our next episode with a few further reflections and to see where the rest of the story with Pilate does go, because it's, as we know, this is just one stop on that journey. Thanks for listening. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Liz. Thank you very much.